Welcome to church. It is so amazing to be here on a wonderful, wonderful sunny day that's slightly cooler than what we've been experiencing recently. So that's good to see. That event yesterday that you saw a video of just a couple minutes ago is reflective of the impact that our serving this community gives us and gives God ultimately, is as we continue to make inroads, continue to make God's presence known by making our presence known, to be that beacon. What we really want to be is that church that if someone wakes up on a Sunday morning and they feel like this can't be all there is, we want to be the church that comes to mind for that individual to say, I've seen those people. They look like nice people. They look like warm, caring, friendly, compassionate people. I see them serving this community with no strings attached in many different ways. Maybe that would be a safe place for me to take what is hurting in me, what needs healing in me. That's why we do this. It's not to bring us glory. Not in any way. We do those things so that the community recognizes that God is for them. That there is a place where they can go and connect and be and process through that stuff of life. Right? That's what we want to be as a church. We want to be loving and accepting and forgiving and warm. And this is not the message this morning. I'm on a tangent and I got to stop. But you know what? I find stopping hard. I find that it's just, you wouldn't know it to look at me, but I'm a pretty high energy person. I'm pushing all the time. And while it may not always seem that externally, it's always that internally. I'm just highly driven, highly motivated. And at some point, it has to stop because you hit a wall. You get tired. And so I have a vacation looming, and Tara and I have a little trip planned, but we're not going to tell any of you because you'll all just come there and spoil it. We actually don't know what we're going to do. At one time we thought, well, you know what? Let's just take a couple of weeks and let's just drive. You know, let's just go out to Montana and see Yellowstone Park and this and that, without a thought that, well, it's like 10,000 kilometers. But that thought doesn't put me, I love to drive. Like, to me, a vacation of just driving actually is a vacation. And Tara and I would differ that way. I mean, she likes to drive too. We go for drives all the time. It's like a little mini vacation for us to grab a couple hours and go out in the car and just drive. And I think it was just last week that we were kind of processing through the vacation, still planning on spending like 10 or 12 days driving 1,000 kilometers a day, because, you know, why not? And she said, you know what I don't understand? And I'm like, why? And she said, I don't understand why you don't want to just go somewhere like a cabin by a lake or something and just put your feet up and just kick back and relax. Because to her, that sounds amazing. And she said, I don't understand why you wouldn't want to do that. Have you actually thought that through? Guys, don't you hate it when your wives say something that makes sense? And it actually just kind of forces you to stop. Oh, well, what did you have to go and say that for? Well, it was one of those moments, and a few minutes passed, and we just kind of sat there in that silence that any married couple understands, right? You get to that point where you're comfortable with silence. But the wheels in my head were turning. And when I came out with, as a response to that, was this. It was, well, here's the thing. My job is not actually physical. It's mental. And my mind never stops. My mind is racing all the time. And I don't need a physical rest. I don't need to go somewhere and sit down and put my feet up, because if I'm being honest, I might stop, but my thoughts won't. And it was almost a scary thought for me. And we dug a little deeper. And I had to admit that what I was trying to do is I gotta do a vacation that fills that time with distractions, so I don't think about the stuff that I'm always thinking about. You know what? That's not good. That's not healthy. Does anybody else have a mind that is just going all the time? It's just like constantly, and I know everywhere there's some wives poking husbands and saying, "Do you even have a mind?" Anyway, and he's saying, "Well, apparently not. I married you, right?" So, ta-da, cha. I'm going on vacation, so I got a few weeks around. Anyway, do you? Absolutely, there are some people in this room, I know it. Even if it's not all the time, you've had spells, you've had periods where your mind just goes and goes and goes and goes and goes and goes, and it won't stop. And it doesn't matter what you do, you can't seem to make it stop. There was a very wise man in the Bible, more than one, but one stands out. His name was Solomon. He was king. He was a son of King David. And Solomon is known as the wisest man who ever lived. Before he took the throne, God appeared to Solomon and said, "Solomon, if you could have anything in the world, what would it be?" And many people would wish for peace on earth or riches or this or that, and Solomon just wanted to be wise. And God says, "You've chosen wisely, and because you have, I will not only give you great wisdom, I will give you great riches, and you'll build my temple," and whatever. And Solomon was greatly blessed. And one of the things that Solomon undertook to do, and if you're the smartest person in the world, why not? He set about to discover the meaning of life. He wanted to know, what is life all about? Well, let's look at what Solomon wrote in the book of Ecclesiastes, which is a hard book to say or even spell, which is indicative of how smart, Solomon is. Anyway, he says this, under the inspiration of God, "What do people get for all the toil and anxious striving with which they labor under the sun?" What do they get? All their days, their work is grief and pain. And even at night, their minds do not rest. Anybody been there? Lay in bed, your mind's not resting. Solomon was wrestling with this. And he must have been wrestling with it because he must have been experiencing it. Why do I do this? And do you know what his conclusion was? That passage goes on to say it's all meaningless. It's a chasing after the wind. It makes no difference. All of your worrying, all of that mind racing is doing nothing to fix what ails you. And Solomon's father David, again, under the inspiration of God through the Holy Spirit, he wrote this in the book of Psalms. And maybe Solomon was even reflecting back on what his dad has written. And King David said, "Be still and know that I am God." Don't wish that I'm God. Don't think that I'm God. Don't hope that I'm God. Know that I am God. Be still. Do you know that the Hebrew phrase, "be still," do you know what it actually means? Literally translated, it means cease striving. And you have Solomon saying, anxious striving is meaningless, it's worthless. And some of us, we can't help but do it. And listen to me, I'm not preaching at you, I'm preaching with you. That's an affliction that I deal with. And it's a cycle that needs to be broken. So let's talk about Jesus. We're in church. So We talk about Jesus. Think Jesus had a lot on his mind? You ever stop and think about what Jesus had on his mind? What must have been going through his head constantly? Like, right out of the gate, the first thing that Jesus had to think about, don't sin. Whatever you do, don't sin. Because if you sin, there's no point you even being here. The wheels come off this thing, and your sacrifice will ultimately be worthless. So Jesus' first thing he had to always think about, I can't sin, I can't sin, I can't sin, I can't sin. Listen, if someone came to me and said, listen, you can't sin, I would sin within 10 minutes. Somehow, some way. I'm not going to get through this day. The first thing Jesus had to think, I can't sin, I can't sin, I can't sin. And then he had to process, I'm going to start my earthly ministry, and when I start my earthly ministry, I'm going to have 3 years, and I got to get a ragtag group of know-nothing, obstinate, belligerent guys, and I got to gather them together, and I got to raise them up, and I got to train them, and I got to disciple with them. I got to live with them, and some of them stink, and they didn't have a lot of showers. And I got to live with these guys, and I got to train them, because I got to raise them up, because ultimately I'm going to die. And they need to be able to carry my message throughout the whole entire world. So I got to do that, but I got to do that. The whole time I'm doing that, I have no place to live. I don't know where my next meal is coming from. I got a crowd of clowns that are following around who hate me, who are hanging on my every word to try to find a reason to throw me in jail or whip me or beat me or kill me. And I got crowds everywhere I go, full of needs, full of hands reaching out to me. They need to be healed spiritually, physically. They're needy. I need to teach them. I'm preaching multiple times a day, sometimes to crowds of thousands or tens of thousands of people. Do you think Jesus had a lot on his mind? Yes. Of course he did. Of course he did. Not the least of which is knowing that at the end of that 3 years, he would be dragged through the streets, beaten to near death, humiliated, ridiculed publicly, and die the most unimaginably torturous, painful death that mankind could conceive of, publicly, in front of people, but not all people, because his own people abandoned him. Yeah, he had a lot in his mind. And sometimes when I think about the things that consume me, or that I worry about, or I stress about, I almost feel like, what right do I have? Who do I think I am? And do you know, sometimes what happens is part of the reason that we carry that and worry and stress about that so much is because we can't be still and know that God is God. See, God has a job. God's job is to be God. Our job is to be still. To be what? Still. And why can we be still? Because God is God. God's got this. Well, thanks, Pastor. I can go now. Everything's good. No. We have to learn how to be still. It should be something that's hardwired in us, and guess what? It is. We just lost it in the hustle and bustle of our own creations. So let me tell you 3 truths right now that we just got to get in our heads. Okay? And they're based on how Jesus lived his life. And we are called to be conformed to the image of Christ. We're called to look at him, to be our example and say, okay, how did Christ live? And the first thing that he knew and he modeled is he consistently and intentionally created space for him to hear from heaven and to spend time with his Father. He consistently and intentionally. I'm going to tell you, you are never going to accidentally fall into a situation where you can just unplug. And I mean that literally. that is so difficult for us. If Jesus were here on earth with us today physically, he would know he needed to unplug. He needed to do that thing that maybe for some of us might even give us the shakes. He would need to turn off that cursed phone. He'd need to unplug the computer. And see, what Jesus did is he would withdraw. Because what Jesus knew above all else, I need consistent and intentional time to hear from my Father. The second thing that Jesus knew, and we need to know, is there is no such thing as intimacy without intentionality. Left to our own devices, not being intentional, we will drift. We need to be intentional in every relationship. That's true in our earthly relationship. It's certainly true in our heavenly relationship, and Jesus knew that. And we need to know that. There is no such thing as intimacy without intentionality. Don't be fooled. You won't achieve it. And the third thing is, listen, this is what Jesus knew beyond a shadow of a doubt, okay? Without intimacy with the Father, you will not get his peace and rest. So these three things go together. Carving out that consistent time, that intentional time. Unplugging, withdrawing, seeking God's face. You are not going to get God's peace and God's rest by a drifting off to sleep, now I lay me down to sleep prayer at the end of your day. Sorry to tell you. Not sorry, actually. It's not going to happen. And you're going to wonder why things are spinning out of control. I can't stop. My mind was racing, and I'm worried, and I'm this, and I'm that, and I'm that. And I say, whoa, have you sought God, like truly? Well, yeah, I prayed to him. When? Like over lunch? Like what? Like when have you actually done what Jesus modeled to actually say, I'm tapping out here, and I need to go and be with my Father? You know, if you look and read through the Gospels, you're going to see that Jesus did this over and over again, not necessarily daily. So I'm going to get to that later. I'm not talking about a daily practice necessarily. I'm talking about a practice that becomes part of how you live in the grand scheme of things. Look, I've never known a person, okay, ever in all my years of ministry or growing up or whatever, I have never known a person who displayed those fruits of the Spirit, right? Those ones that are supposed to be the signs of when you're living fully for God and God is blessing your life and you're turning that blessing back to God. And these what are they? The love, the joy, the peace, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. I have never known a person who lived that consistently that did not understand what I am talking about right now. Is intentionally and consistently saying, I need to hear from my Father. I need to listen to him more than he needs to hear me. And that happens through an intentional, consistent, built relationship with him that looks different than a morning prayer and 5-minute devotion. So let's look at this scripture, and we'll find it in the book of Mark, and we see what Jesus is modeling, and it says, before daybreak. That's other translations say, while it was still dark. The next morning, Jesus got up and went out to an isolated place to pray. And later, Simon and the others went out to find him, and when they found him, they said, everyone's looking for you. And Jesus replied, we must go to other towns as well, and I will preach to them too. That's why I came. Jesus carved out that time in his busy life, in an overwhelming world where He must have just been processing what he knew is, look, you know what? Before I can face any of this, I need some time with my Father. And in this circumstance, what it looked like was him getting up early, right? They would have been sharing a room or in a house or whatever, and he would have got up and quietly just went out by himself. And to be sure, you know, if you tried that in your own home and you just thought, hey, I'm just going to go into another room or just go. Like if you got kids, you say, oh, the only time I can be alone is when I'm in the bathroom. Look, you know, if you've lived this, you no sooner get in the bathroom, there's like a set of hands under the door, right? Like trying to pull it open. This is a process. This is like, I intentionally need to go and do this. Jesus shows us what that looked like. Look, have you ever felt like this? I do all the time. You just sit and you're just rubbing your face and it's like, I don't know how I'm going to handle this anymore. I don't know. I don't know if I can take this. The reality is life can be overwhelming, right? It can be overwhelming. And this is a silly little illustration, but I want to show you anyway. You've probably been wondering what's under that cloth, if you even noticed it. But it's like you start life, right? You get up in the morning and you shower. You're getting dressed. You're planning your day. You're getting your kids up. You're ready for school. You're packing lunches, fight traffic, drop off kids, go to work, do project, attend meeting, difficult coworker, go to dentist, get a haircut, run errands, take kids to practice, break up a fight between the kids, make dinner, clean up after dinner, listen to your spouse complain, do laundry, volunteer at church, water the garden, mow the lawn, just do. Now what? Now what are you running on? Can I tell you? You can't pour into others with an empty cup. You can't do it. Jesus understood this. He said, if I'm going to be any good at all, if you're going to be any good at all, your cup needs to be full. And many of us, we can't understand this. We read a verse like this verse we'll put up on the screen and we can't even get heads around it. Our eyes just glaze over. It's like, I have come, this is Jesus speaking, I have come that you may have life and have it to the full. And you're thinking, I got nothing else. I got nothing. Why are you telling me? If you came that I could have life and I could have life to the full, why do I feel like this? And Jesus is saying, did you connect with my Father? Is that part of your life? Because if you don't do that, you will never know his peace and strength. You'll never know it. You'll know about it, but you won't know it. Because we don't do it. Let's look at 5 quick times, okay, that Jesus withdrew. And over in the Gospels, that is the phrase, Jesus withdrew and went. Jesus withdrew from the distraction and connected with his Father before he started his ministry. It's like Jesus came up out of that water after being baptized, and the first thing he did was go into the wilderness for 40 days and 40 nights to fast and pray. Because he knew, I need to be full. And the second example is he withdrew from that distraction, connected with the Father before making important decisions. In Luke 6, 12, and 13, Jesus it's down to he's got hundreds of people, okay, that are called disciples, but he's trying to pick a core group. And he's choosing that 12. And before he made that final decision, he withdrew to pray. To be with his Father. He wanted to hear from. How oftentimes do our prayers look like God listened to me? Jesus' prayers were, God, I need to hear from you. Like now. And I'm not leaving this place, wherever that place may be, until I hear from you. Can I tell you, if you show up that way, God will show up. If you show up just talking, he'll let you talk. He's patient, and he's kind. He's like, just let me know if you want me to say anything. And can you stop telling me what to do? I already know what to do. You're the one who needs to know what I know. And how are you going to hear that if you don't shut up? We need God coming in. And in our brokenness, we think it's all about us pouring out and not actually understanding what Jesus was showing us. You need to hear from my Father in heaven. You need to withdraw. You need to intentionally and you need to consistently make that place, make that practice where I can speak to you. Let's keep going. A couple more examples. He withdrew after a long, hard day at work. In this particular example, Jesus had just performed miracles and fed a group of 5,000 people with one boy's lunch. And he was exhausted after a hard day, and he withdrew to be alone with his Father because he needed what? He needed to be refilled. Why don't we do that? Keep going here. Getting short on time. After ministering to crowds, another example, and the crowds were pressing into him to the point where he was on the seashore, almost standing in the water, and his only retreat was to get in a boat and go to the other side of the lake because he needed to withdraw and be with his Father. Why? Because in his humanness, he was overwhelmed, and the antidote to being overwhelmed is time with the Father. Is this making sense at all? Okay. Because it is important. So what am I actually talking about here, okay? Just to bring clarity to this. What I'm actually talking about, and I'm hoping I gave you a slide, Stephen, I don't know. You might still be thinking, what about your other example? Never mind, we're running out of time. This is not a pattern or a routine I'm talking about, okay? I am not talking about a pattern or routine of daily prayer and devotions. I am not talking about make sure you carve out 15 minutes in the morning, you offer up a prayer in the morning, and you read a passage out of Our Daily Bread or whatever devotional book you use, and then that's it. That's your God day. That's your God time for the day. That's not what I'm talking about. Should that be part of your day? Certainly. But from time to time, you need to withdraw. Because you need to hear from God more than he needs to hear from you. It's a recognition that we need that. We need dedicated periods of time, and it probably won't be a daily thing. In fact, if it's scheduled, maybe it means less. I don't know. But if you're plugged in, you'll know. You'll know when it's overwhelming, when it's my mind is racing and won't stop, and this stop. Reading a devotional book won't fix that. Time alone with the Father will. Time spent listening. And you say, I don't know what that means. And I said, I'm going to tell you something. You'll know it when it happens. I feel like I should stop. I'm looking at the clock and it's 12. Can I have 5 minutes? This is vacation time right now. I get paid extra. So, when did I start? A number of years ago, we're just skipping that. Stephen, just go right to the next slide. It is a number of years ago. I owned my own car dealership, and I was going regularly to the auctions in Halifax. We were based in Moncton, and I got this. We were at a season in life, Tara and I, where we had chosen to raise our children outside the bubble of vocational ministry because it's really hard on kids, and we didn't want to do that to our family that we were bringing together. And so we chose to step back and take time to do that. And so I started my own business. And when it came time when we said, I think it's time. Let's get back into full-time ministry. And so we spent a period of like 8-9 months, felt like 10 years, and maybe it was over a year, I can't exactly remember. But where I was applying to different churches, and I was getting no answers, or I was getting like an interview here and there, and nothing was coming of it, and I was getting frustrated, and I couldn't understand. Why does no one want me? What's going on? Like, God, what are you doing, right? Like, there's a shortage of pastors, and here I am. I'm able and willing, and like, no doors are opening. And I got frustrated, like, really frustrated. And so I got it in my mind, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to get together, and I'm going to go, and I'm going to talk to God, and I'm going to give him a piece of my mind. I'm going to let him know what I'm thinking. And what I decided to do is I was going to head to an auction in Halifax, and I packed an overnight bag, and I was just going to go and stay overnight. And in the hotel that night, my intention was I will do business with God, and I'll tell him how he should be doing things. Honestly. See, I'm that broken, you don't understand. And as it happened, that didn't actually happen. I didn't make it to the auction that week. That didn't happen. It was a couple of weeks later where just out cutting me off. Is that it? No. And a couple of weeks later, and I was just out for a drive that I feel like is therapy, just kind of driving. And of all places, I found myself in Rogersville. And I mean, who goes to Rogersville? Why would you? But there I am. I'm in Rogersville. And I still had that overnight bag in the back of my car. And I did what is so unlike me. I drove up to that monastery, and there's this big red door. And if you know me at all, you will know I am such an introvert. I am not the person that did what this person just did. I walked up to that door, and I knocked on it. And the door opened up, and there's a monk. Just like you would see on TV. Like, he had a brown robe, a rope belt, sandals, like he was like a caricature of a monk. And I'm looking at him, and I said, "Is it true that if someone you'll just take people in?" And he kind of smiled, and I said, "Like, I'm not Catholic." And he said, "No, are you seeking God?" And I said, "Yes." And he said, "Then yeah, you can come in." And I said, "Really? Just like that?" "Yeah, just like that." I said, "Hang on." So I ran back to the car. I pick up my phone. You remember this? Okay, I remember this. And I'm like, I dialed Tara. And I said, "Tara." She said, "What?" I said, "I'm going to be away for some time." And she's like, "What? What are you saying?" And I said, "Well, I'm at a monastery, and I'm going in." And she's like, "You're becoming a monk?" And I said, "No, I don't know. I got to go." And I hung up. And in there, we were not allowed any electric devices at all. And I was shown to my cell. That's what they call it. There's this like little bed, like about this wide. And I had a little sink with cold water, a little writing table, and a cross on the wall. That's what I had. And the monk said, "Here's the rules. You got to live by the patterns of the monastery, right? So you have to be respectful of that. You're not allowed to talk to anybody. If a brother speaks to you, then you can speak. Otherwise, you can't have any interaction. And your food will be on a tray in such and such a time, whatever." I'm just like, "Oh, okay." And I sat down the end of my bed. He walked out. And I'm like, "Well, what have I done? Like, now what? If you show up, God will show up." And I walked over, I closed my door. I walked back toward my tiny little bed. And don't think I'm crazy, but God began talking to me. God began talking to me as clearly as I am talking to you right now. So I'm not talking about some thought. And maybe some of you have experienced that. I know a couple of you have because you told me, because I've shared this with you and you said that's happened to me. Because God, I thought I had business with God, but God had business with me. And I showed up. And God honored that. And for the next number of days, God just spoke to me. And it was like, I would go in that room and he would be talking to me, and I was journaling and I was writing down, and he was revealing things to me about me that were causing me to be excluded. It's like, God's like, I can't use you right now. You're broken. You have this and that, and this needs to be dealt with, and that needs to be dealt with. And on one level it was painful, on another level it was the most freeing thing ever. It was both humiliating and exhilarating. I can't even describe it. And can I tell you that if you were sitting there, would you have heard God's voice that same way if you were sitting there with me? I don't know. I just know I heard it. And I journaled and journaled and journaled and journaled, and God worked, and he worked, and he worked, and he worked. And I came out the other side of that experience a different person. So what am I saying? Am I saying, hey, go to Rogersville, go to that monastery? Unfortunately, you can't. It's closed. But that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying you need to make intentional time that looks different than what you normally do. And you need to unplug and separate and withdraw and go somewhere where you can't be disturbed. No one can find you. And you need to let God speak and fill. If you show up, he will. He promises that he will. And we see through the life of Jesus that that's what happened. If we're going to be anything, it should be like Jesus. Thank you for letting me share. It actually turned out to be 8 minutes, not 5. But let's pray.